Hey there, folks. I have no clue what just happened, but here I am, right? That has never happened before. My phone just went completely black and logged me out of it. I had to log back in, and now here I am. What happened? I have no idea. I'm still here. My phone is fully charged, but it just went black. So, if anyone is on the old live, please post a link to this live. Let's keep this going. What's going on here? My phone is fine, fully charged. YouTube doesn't like me. It's funny, I was criticizing Facebook. That's eerie, right? I was criticizing Facebook and their rules about voting, and then all of a sudden, oh, his phone goes black, his live is over. Well, here I am, folks. Please post, somebody please take the link of this, post it in the other live, and keep us going. Let's bring everybody to the next one. There was a bunch of us. Let's keep this going. Wow, I don't know what's going on here, right? That's very, very, very weird. I haven't had that one happen. I've had the phone go off, right? It freeze. That I've had before. I've had the live just go down. That one was new to me. The phone just kind of went black. That was weird. That was very, very, very weird. But yeah, let's bring folks back. Let's keep going. I'm not going anyplace. I'm having a great time. It's 9:30. I started at 8. We're having a great time. Are you going to continue on Facebook? Yes, I am going to continue on Facebook, Brandon. Thank you. Welcome, Brandon, by the way. Didn't give you a shout out earlier because I didn't see you on here. Yes, so I'm hoping you all can come back pretty soon. Somebody please post in the chat of the old live, cut and paste, bring people into the new conversation. I don't know what happened there. Very, 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 very strange. But anyway, so as I was saying, hey, faint signals from Vega. Hey, Caleb. Hey, already did. Thank you, I am Elphilis. Thank you. 2D fan keeps raising MMT. Well, listen, folks, I was making a point about Facebook. So it is against the rules on Facebook to encourage people not to vote. If you post on Facebook, don't vote, they'll take it down because that's election meddling. Keep in mind, I would never put that. I think people should vote. I am telling people they should vote. However, here's the thing, right? In Venezuela, the U.S.-backed opposition that is frequently appearing on U.S. television, oh my goodness, the U.S.-backed opposition in Venezuela has been telling people in Venezuela not to vote for years. For years, the Venezuelan opposition has been telling people don't vote. Don't vote. It's a dictatorship. Elections are declared rigged months before they even happen. Right? The Venezuelan opposition is telling people not to vote. For years. Why is the Venezuelan opposition not banned from Facebook? Right? That's election meddling, right? If you tell people not to vote, that's election meddling. You're not allowed to do that, right? Right? Russian opposition. The folks in Russia who don't like Putin. For years, they've been telling people, don't vote, don't vote. They declare elections to be rigged months before they happen. Here's my question, folks. Why is it that telling people not to vote in a U.S. election is unpermitted, but urging people to boycott elections in other countries is permitted? Well, because our elections are fair, Caleb, and theirs aren't. Well, according to you, right? Look, election boycotts, they happen, right? I know that in Peru, during the 1990s, when there was that armed uprising going on by the Shining Path, El Sendero Luminoso, one of the things that El Sendero Luminoso did is it basically demanded that people not vote. And so the military of Peru would go into villages with guns drawn and force people to vote. Why? Because by voting, you were giving legitimacy. You were saying that the dual power structure set up by the Shining Path, that doesn't count. No, you're voting in our election because we're the legitimate government. And that's what elections do ultimately, right? Elections are a way of conferring legitimacy onto a government, right? If the government just says, hey, we're the government, you can't really whatever. But if everyone goes out and votes, everyone kind of agrees that what comes out of the vote, it's a way, right? And I think people should vote. I do. In the U.S. elections, I think people should vote. I think people should participate. I think it's very important. I think the reason that people should vote is because voting is like the only time. It's really the only time that a lot of people think about politics. Most people, if they think about politics, they think about, do I like Trump or do I like the Democrat? Most people aren't thinking the way we're thinking. We're here talking about ideology and Marxism and socialism and systems and all of that. But to most people, politics is you're going to vote for Tweedledee, you're going to vote for Tweedledum. So if you don't participate in that, and you don't have an analysis of that, you don't have anything to say about it, then you're just kind of irrelevant to most people, right? Most people aren't going to take you seriously because you're not part of it. So I'm in favor of voting. I'm in favor of participating. And no, I don't like the whole, I don't vote, I revolt. Come on. You know what I mean? Give me a break. You know what I mean? I believe voting is something that people that believe in socialism ought to be doing in the United States. That's my opinion. If you are someone who believes in socialism, you need to promote socialism in the political process rather than, That said, though, right? What if I didn't think that, right? What if I was, an anarchist? And I wanted to make a Facebook post and say, don't vote, revolt, or don't give legitimacy to the capitalist system. Shouldn't I have the right to say that? Right? Venezuelan opposition people that are backed by the United States say that all the time. They say, don't vote, don't give legitimacy to Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro. They're all commies. Right? Opposition people in Russia do that all the time. Don't vote. Don't give legitimacy. They wouldn't let who's the guy, Navalny? They wouldn't let him run because he's a criminal, because he's broken the law. But they wouldn't let him run, so it's not a real election. They are allowed to do that. U.S. media highlights them and all of that. No one ever calls it election meddling, right? It's not election meddling. I don't get this. I really don't get this, folks, right? So Facebook is saying that I'm not allowed to make a post saying don't vote, which I wouldn't make because that's not my position. But regardless, all over the world, people backed by the United States, have you ever noticed this? When I was in college, of all courses, I took public speaking. You'd think in public speaking, you'd learn to be like a better orator. But our final in public speaking is we were all assigned a brutal dictator, and we would talk about how to help the people overcome this brutal dictator. That was my public speaking course, right? And I remember, the brutal dictator that people were assigned was like Hugo Chavez, Mugabe, every anti-imperialist you ever heard of is a brutal dictator. Of course, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, not on the list, but regardless. So, we were assigned this, and I remember in that class that I had in college arguing with my teacher, and it was like, when Mugabe, we were talking about Mugabe, and I said Mugabe is wildly popular in Africa. She said, no, he's not. No, he's not. And I said, well, why does he win UN-monitored elections? Why does, when he speaks in other African countries, people pile in to see him? Like Mugabe, he beat the British Empire. He's considered to be... No, he's not popular because anyone in Zimbabwe who disagrees with Mugabe is shot, I was told. And I said, really, then why did 40% of the population vote against him? Did he then kill 40% of the population for disagreeing with him? Because anyone who disagrees with him is shot. Well, no, but they're like rigged. It's like people have these silly notions, right, about how things work, and it's, it's just pretty ridiculous. It really is. It really is. And, it's just, there's just no, I don't know. And who knows? Maybe Silicon Valley, maybe our tech overlords are messing with me. It's funny. I'm seeing comments from all kinds of people right now coming through. You're all here, but yet it's telling me there's only 2 of you watching this, which is interesting because there's way more than 2 of you making comments here. So there you go. I don't know why it's telling me there's 2 people watching this, but I see you all, the Inundation, Jacob Maxey, you're all here. I'm glad you're all here. I don't know what happened when it just went black. It just went black. That was very strange. 56 watching, says Kinky. Great. I see 57, says Jacob Maxey. Swine Class, YouTube lying to you. Well, that's right. That is right, Swine Class. YouTube is lying. I'm glad you're all here. I'm having a great time, right? I mean, we're going. But Facebook, and I will say, I wanted to say this. I made this point on the last live. I want to make this point again. Because it needs to be made. Okay, so, right, I am against, let me emphasize, I am against tech censorship. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, they basically got a monopoly, right? And they have a monopoly, so they should be obligated to platform everybody, I think, right? I mean, obviously within reason, like child pornography shouldn't be legal, stuff like that. But within reason, every opinion should be allowed. I don't think that Twitter, unless they want their monopoly forcibly broken up by the government, right? Which that could happen too. But as long as they have a de facto monopoly, I think they need to allow all voices. and not suppress them. I think they need to allow racist views. Hey, I'm not a racist. I don't think racism is okay, but, you know, Twitter, if they're going to have a de facto monopoly, they have to allow, you know what I mean? If you're a monopoly, you're more of a utility, right? Your electric company, for example, can't say, well, you know, Caleb is he is a dirty, rotten Marxist. I am going to turn off his electricity. No, because your power company has a monopoly. Where am I going to get power? How am I going to get electricity if you do that, right? So based on that, based on the fact these are de facto monopolies, like your power company, like your phone company, because Twitter and Facebook and all that are de facto monopolies, they should be obligated to allow all political views. I am not for tech censorship. I'm not, right? Right? If you ban somebody from Twitter, they're going to get on the other Twitter? No. And so because they have, you know, they have de facto, you know what I mean? And Swine Class is right. You imagine they've cut your phone service because of your opinion, right? Oh, Caleb said something racist. Caleb said something sexist. Caleb said something communist. Turn his phone service off. You can't do that, right? We have rules to make sure that doesn't happen, right? You know, so on that ground, hey, I don't like PragerU. I don't like a lot of these people that are being censored. I really don't. A lot of these people that are being deplatformed are pretty not, they're scum. But that said, I think that they shouldn't have that kind of power. Private companies shouldn't have the power to silence and do that. But regardless, okay? And you know, PragerU, Dinesh D'Souza, all of them are just beating this drum. Candace Owens, they're just beating this drum. Oh my God, our free speech is being taken away. They're shutting us down. Our free speech, the liberals are out to get us. It's like this dumb every day. Oh my God, we're being silenced. We're being silenced. No one can hear us. We're being suppressed. We're being suppressed. Oh my God, our rights are being taken away everywhere you go. Oh my God, Antifa beats us up when we speak. It's like all day long. These people are going with, oh my God, we're being suppressed, and Antifa is coming to get us, and they're banned us from Twitter, and our free speech is being taken away. I mean, it's like, it doesn't end, right? It's just this endless, oh my God, we're being oppressed, oh my God, and Fox News is the only network to allow, oh my God, we're being oppressed. And then, on Thursday, July 4th, the Revolutionary Communist Party burned an American flag in front of the White House, and they lost their shit. And they went out there and they were beating them up and there was fist fighting. Oh my God, they can't burn an American flag. And all these people that are all like, oh my God, you can't take down my Twitter because I said the N-word. Oh, but you know, they can't light a piece of cloth on fire. That hurts my feelings. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? If you think that Twitter shouldn't be allowed to ban you for saying racist things because that might offend somebody, why can't the RCP offend you by lighting a flag on fire? I'm not for flag burning, but come on, right? Their whole argument is like, oh, we should be allowed to say it because it's offensive. Why can't people offend your patriotism, right? If the RCP, right, if you want to be able to say the N-word on Twitter, why shouldn't the RCP be able to light a flag on fire, right? They weren't even doing it on Twitter, right? They were doing it in a public space, free speech, right? I mean, if Antifa shouldn't beat you up for having your Proud Boys rally, why should the Proud Boys go and try to beat up the RCP for burning the American flag? I don't get it. The level of hypocrisy there. I mean, and it's like, and yeah, I mean, watch the video. I mean, it's like, so they light a flag on fire. Somebody grabs it from them. There's a scuffle. The RCPers are like joining arms and all of that. I mean, goodness gracious, right? I mean, you know, and 2 days later, they're still going, oh, our free speech is being suppressed. Oh, my God, we're being shut down. Oh, and they're still beating this drum. And they don't even notice that they all tried to beat up somebody for lighting a flag on fire because it triggered them, because it offended them. And then they're back to, oh, my God, we're being suppressed. It's you know, it's just, it's pretty ridiculous. Pretty ridiculous, right? I think, personally, that if you feel like people shouldn't vote, you should be able to say that on Facebook, right? I personally think voting is something that leftists should be doing, but if you personally feel people shouldn't vote, you should have the right to say it on Facebook. I personally feel that if the RCP and the Bobavakian people want to light an American flag on fire, they should be allowed to do it. I don't think that's the right approach for socialists. I went into that in great detail on my other live, but I think you should be able to do it. You know, I mean, hey, right? Other countries around the world are not predicated on free speech, right? There's a lot of countries in the world where the whole free speech thing, they don't pretend, right? They just say, look, we don't allow certain things, that's that. Here in the United States, the whole thing is we're so great because of freedom. We're so great because of freedom. Oh, freedom is amazing. And then we have all this silliness. We really do, right? I mean, there you go. Now, the Twitter argument is they say, well, we're a private service, private company, and we can choose who to do business with and who not to. And then they also say, well, we're protecting other users. That's their argument, right? That if you, right, I don't know, like if you show up at someone's business naked and you make everyone else there uncomfortable, the business owner has the right to throw you out to protect his other customers from seeing you naked. That's their argument too, right? That okay, we're making a cleaner environment for the other users by banning users that are racist, sexist, homophobic, or telling people not to vote. We're protecting the other users, but you can't block people in real life, right? If you're in a restaurant and somebody walks in naked, they're violating your rights, right? Indecent exposure, they get arrested. But in Facebook, if someone makes a racist comment, block, problem solved, right? I mean, on Facebook, right, someone shows up in your news feed, they're offensive, block, right? And by the way, I've learned, right, I do these lives, I got people talking at me, I just block, block. You know what I mean? And it's always like, oh, you're a punk, you wouldn't debate me. No, just block. I mean, seriously, right? I mean, there's so many people out there saying all kinds of crazy stuff, and oh my God, block. You just gotta, Kinky says, I love blocking. I don't like blocking people, but it's like, I don't know. There's an old story time. There's an old story about Joe Louis. Joe Louis was the first African-American heavyweight champion of the world. Boxer. He was going out to dinner. With his wife. Someone recognized him and immediately came up to him. Started trying to pick a fight with him. Joe Louis just ignored him. Insulted him. Insulted his ethnic background, cursed him out and insulted him in every possible way. Joe Louis just kept eating his dinner. Finally, the guy walked out. He just gave up. The guy walked out. So someone turned to Joe Louis, and he said, Joe Louis, you're the heavyweight champion of the world. You're a great boxer. Why in the world did you let that guy get away with that? And he said, if I were a famous opera singer, and someone talked that way to me, do you think I would then turn to them and sing them an aura? Right? Joe Louis was famous for being a boxer. The guy was provoking him so he could say that he got punched by Joe Louis. That's what it was about. And so Joe Louis said, I'm not going to compliment you. I'm not going to do what I do. I'm not going to do my skill as a boxer to you when you're being a jerk to me. I think that's a good point, right? And I think that's a good way to think about it, right? If you're somebody who takes politics very seriously, like I do, you do things like these lives, you have these kind of conversations, why would you dignify somebody who just comes at you? You know what I mean? Why would you do that, right? Why would you give somebody, who F you, why would you give them the time of day? Something to think about. But there's other things that people talk about. The other thing is, I will say, there's something about, and it's weird, Twitter is Twitter. But there's something about Facebook arguments that they just never go anyplace good. Twitter can be fun, right? Twitter, you can argue with somebody, they tweet back at you, you tweet back at them, everyone watches, likes, and it's a thread. There's something about Facebook. I don't know what it is, but Facebook arguments are like the gutter, right? I think I have never seen anything good come out of a Facebook argument, ever. I've seen people stop being friends over them. But Facebook arguments are like ugly, nasty, awful things. I don't know. I mean, I wonder if part of it, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here. This isn't planned out. This is just me thinking. The thing about Facebook is, say that you were somebody who was really into surfing. You had a friend who just hated surfing. You might hang out with that friend and you'd never talk about surfing. You'd go surfing, you'd have a great time surfing with all your other friends. But you meet that friend, you think that friend, surfing, not his cup of tea. He really doesn't like surfing. So when I hang out with Bob, Not going to talk about surfing, just going to not bring it up. Maybe if he asked me, I'd tell him. I'm not going to lie to him, but I know he doesn't like surfing, so I'm going to avoid talking about surfing with Bob. Here's the problem. If Bob is your Facebook friend, when you go surfing and you take a selfie of yourself on your surfboard, he's going to see it. If he's your Facebook friend. And so you can't really hide. We all kind of do that, right? With people we know, we hide. We don't hide. We don't lie. But when there's somebody we know, we de-emphasize certain aspects of ourselves around them in the hopes of, being more friendly with them. And the problem is that on Facebook, your whole life is out there for everyone. Maybe, is that the problem? Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Isn't that Bill O'Reilly who said, am I wrong? Maybe that's what the issue is, right? But yes, I've known so many people. And the other thing about Facebook, I don't know what it is, but it's like, you wouldn't say it in person, right? You wouldn't say it in person, but it's something about that Facebook, but this could be Twitter, this could be anything. You wouldn't say it in person. But somehow, it's like people have way less of a filter, right? If you're out with somebody, you say one thing, the other person gets a little heated. If you're in person, you go, ooh, cool your jets. But for some reason, if it's typed out, and it gets a little heated, and then you get a little heated, and then it's like you don't have that same instinct to cool it off. Cool it off. Now, Swine Class is saying, well, it's not your actual life. It's not your whole life. It's just part of your life. And that's a good point, too. And they say that contributes a lot to depression, right? Say somebody's a depressed person, they're having a bad day, they get on Twitter and they see everyone else going out on a date and eating fancy food and hugging their boyfriend, and they just think, oh, my life is awful, everyone's miserable. Well, no, I'm miserable, everyone else is happy. Well, the other people are miserable too, they just don't post about it, right? No one posts, I got an F on my paper today, boy, I suck. Well, some people do, but most people only put the good stuff on there, right? They try to craft their Facebook to be, part of their image, right? Everyone uses Facebook to try and be like, look how awesome I am. And you get a lot of people that just feel inadequate. They feel like they're not good enough. And they look at Facebook and everyone else is perfect. Everyone else isn't perfect. They just don't post about it, right? People that compare themselves to everyone else. But that's a factor. I know one thing, and this blew my mind. This blew my mind. So, I believe it was recently that Instagram, and here I am zigging around, okay? This is tech censorship. I'm okay with this. Instagram just recently banned pictures of self-mutilation. What took them so long? Seriously. I mean, self-mutilation is an awful thing. Right? If somebody's doing that, I feel deep compassion for that person. I want them to get some help so they don't engage in that kind of behavior. But why in the world? I mean, and again, we're banning racist and sexist and homophobic and nasty, offensive speech. Why is it okay to, slice your flesh open and go, I was having a really bad day today and I cut myself open? That should have immediately been taken down. Right? Just like, hey, they do allow free speech, but, that I don't get, right? Why was it just recently that Instagram said, hey, you can't self-mutilate. If you put up a picture of yourself self-mutilating, we're going to take it down. Why did that just come about? That should have been there from the beginning, right? That just like, that you can't have snuff videos, right? That's one thing you can't do, right? Like there's videos out there, people shooting themselves or killing other people. They take them down. They take it down, right? It goes away. Can't do that. But yet, for on Instagram, they were allowing people to self-mutilate and put the pictures up there. I don't understand that. Why was there no immediate censorship of that? That's like common sense, right? And the person doing it, right? The person doing it is obviously, if they're posting a picture of it, it's serving some desire they have for sympathy or attention. So it's probably really important that it get taken down so you don't encourage that behavior, right? Right? The last thing you want is the person to mutilate, post it on social media, look how depressed I am, look how, and then get a lot of love from that, and then think, oh, this is something I can do when I'm sad. I can just mutilate. And that's it should be immediately taken down. It seems like common sense, right? Just like, Well, whatever. I'm rambling here, and this is probably a trigger warning conversation here. But we'll see. We shall see. But that's just my opinion. We're talking about it's a particularly dark trend on here, right? This is gonna get me some flack. But hey, I'm just saying it, right? I think that that should have been common sense, right? That should be common sense. That's tech censorship I'm okay with. Now, Swineclass says girls twerking and voguing on IG is the same, though. I'm not sure what that means. JT24 says, go for it, Caleb. What am I going for? I'm having a great time. We're just talking, right? Facebook has seen a lot of evidence lately that we're living in another housing bubble. All of these houses buying, call center jobs. Well, the weird thing about the housing bubble, and this needs to be acknowledged, and I've said this before, but here's the thing about the housing bubble. We're approaching a different kind of housing bubble, right? So the housing bubble was basically 2008, 2009. After about a decade before that, Americans just weren't buying houses. So Alan Greenspan, the U.S. Congress, deregulated lending so that Americans could keep buying houses. They legalized all kinds of mortgage lending practices that had been illegal before in the hopes that people would keep buying homes, even though their standard of living had decreased. Basically, keep Americans spending, even though they don't have the money. That was the idea. And then the problem was that after about a decade, you can't do that forever, right? If people can't pay back their loans, they can't pay back their loans, right? And after about a decade, and some of these practices were ridiculous. When I was in Detroit, like one of the famous predatory lending practices, very low mortgage, very, very low, right? You pay this much, $500 a month, whatever. And then after 2 years, you have a balloon payment. And all of a sudden, you've been paying $500 for 2-3 years. You didn't read the contract that after a certain amount of time, they're allowed to jack it. And so they balloon your bill. All of a sudden, your bill is, basically 3-4 times what it was before. There's no way you can do that. Someone who's been paying $500 a month for 2 years, 3 years for their mortgage, all of a sudden it's $1,500 or it's $1,000. It's going to destroy them. They're going to get foreclosed. They're not going to make their payment. They're foreclosed. And so all across the United States, people who had taken out these loans were getting foreclosed on. And the reason that the whole thing started was because people couldn't afford to buy the damn homes to begin with. Did I just say damn? Oh my God. Well, they couldn't afford to buy them to begin with. And so the idea was to just, keep people spending regardless of the fact they couldn't afford it. That was the idea. The problem now, right, a decade after the financial crisis, the problem now is even more complex because now we have a generation of people with student debt. All right? Go to a bank with, say you've got $10,000 of student debt. Say you've got $20,000 of student debt. Go to a bank and try to get a loan to buy a house. Not going to happen, right? You might have a really good job, but you go to that bank and you say, hey, I want a loan to buy a house. And they say, oh, okay, let's take a look at your credit. Oh, wait, you owe $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to somebody else? And you want us to no, canceled. All right? Think about that. So this is like a housing crisis before it happens. Right? There you go. Now, some banker somewhere is going to think, how can we do this? And they're probably going to come up with some kind of scheme, I would say, where they'll lend you the money, even though you already owe this, but you're going to have to, give them one of your kidneys or something. I don't know. I'm exaggerating, of course, but yeah, we're heading for another housing bubble, a housing crisis. We're definitely doing that. There's no question about that. We're headed for another housing crisis, but it's manifesting itself differently. It's manifesting itself very differently. We now have a generation gap to deal with. We have a generation that has been a low-wage generation. It's not like people losing their good-paying industrial jobs. It's people who never had good-paying industrial jobs to begin with. One very troubling trend that I've seen for a long time. I mean, I've read about it. It was a couple of years ago. Is all across the United States, you have your foreclosed homes. That's a reality. But you have foreclosed homes being repurchased after they've been foreclosed on, not by people, not by individuals, but by banks. And banks are renting them out. So increasingly, Americans are having, in places like Iowa and Kansas, Missouri, Ohio, Michigan, they have their house with a white picket fence. They don't own it. They don't own it, right? That's a big trend now too. They don't own that house with the white picket fence on it. They rent it from a bank, right? It used to be you rent an apartment, but you buy a home. Not no more, right? The American dream, that white picket fence, that house with a white picket fence and a little automobile in the front, Leave It to Beaver and all of that. That home now belongs to a bank. And in a way, you could argue that that in itself could signify a shift, right? That a lot of people talk. I mean, there's a lot been written. There's entire books that have been written. Christian Hayes said hi to me 3 times. I see you. There are entire books that have been written about how the white picket fence, the American family home that they own. Now I'm frozen. My goodness. I am frozen. I am frozen. I don't know what's going on here. They are just doing everything they can to stop me tonight. I am having a great time going on here and talking. I'm seeing comments coming up, but I'm frozen. This is... what is going on here, folks? What do you think this is, right? You can hear me. I'm glad you can hear me. Dan Uko says you can hear me. Swine Class can hear me. I was frozen today. What's going on here? So earlier, my phone just stopped. Now my phone is frozen. My expression is fine. Oh, glad to hear it. I'm going to keep talking here. I mean, you can't see me. You've seen the same books all night. Kinky says must be Iran. EV says Caleb, no. Right? David, Caleb versus Goliath, YouTube. YouTube is stopping historical progress. Hey, I'm going to keep going here. Maybe I'll unfreeze in a minute. It still says there's only 2 of you, and I can reading all these comments. There's definitely not just 2 of you. This is particularly ridiculous. But I was making a point about American homes being foreclosed and about how, there's been a shift in consciousness, right? Owning a home, you have your piece of property. You own something. It's yours. It's your little corner of the world that belongs to you. You become a property owner. That affects your consciousness, right? And that was a big part of building that right-wing American middle class, was the belief that that you had a piece of property. You were a property owner. The communists were coming to take your property and give it to those poor people who have to rent. You worked hard to get your little corner of the world. That's a big part of the mindset of what you might call labor aristocracy and all of that, working class people who sympathize with their bosses. Swine Class now says just audio is almost better in a way. Well, that's great. Hey, I'm having a great time here. I'm not going anyplace. The books behind me have been the same. I mean, what is going on here, folks? Is it just that I need to get a new phone? I hope it's not that. But I have a feeling that something's going on here. So Sweeney Todd asked me, is Caleb a dangist, or a dungist, I should say? Well, Sweeney, with all due respect, I would say, no, I am not. I am not a dungist or a dangist because I don't think Deng Xiaoping theory is intended for the United States. Deng Xiaoping theory is an ideology that was developed in China. Deng Xiaoping theory, socialism with Chinese characteristics, was named after the namesake Deng Xiaoping. To be a dungist in the United States would be really, really silly. Are there things about Deng Xiaoping theory that I like? Yes. For example, Deng Xiaoping made very, very important point that socialism and communism are about material abundance. And that was something that had been largely lost in the world communist movement. Especially Pol Pot and the Gang of Four had gotten away from this notion that you need material abundance to build socialism. And this notion of poverty communism, was very widespread. This idea that, well, hey, here's the thing. If you have $10 and 10 people, and you divide it up And that's not desirable. And in fact, the entire point of Marxism, if you read from the various Marxist thinkers, Friedrich Engels, Karl Marx, the entire point of Marxism is that you have to raise productive forces, right? You have to raise productive forces. So socialism on the basis of poverty is nonsense. Poverty and scarcity is the reason for class society. It's the reason we have a state, for example, right? The state exists to protect property, right? If everyone just had everything they needed, we wouldn't have to have a government to keep people from stealing, right? And that the entire, originally, primitive communism was based on extreme scarcity. We got the rise of, feudalism, or first we had the rise of the slavery economic system, and then feudalism, then ultimately, capitalism. All of this is a struggle to raise productive forces. So the notion that you can build some kind of egalitarian socialist society on a level of poverty that is even less than what the capitalist world has is false, right? Socialism is needed to accelerate and advance, as the Inundation is saying, to advance the amount of productivity, to increase the abundance, and it stops the cycle of overproduction. It rationally organizes the economy so you can have more of an abundance. But in the 20th century, because of a lot of the things that happened, we got away from this notion. That you need abundance, right? And that, I think, there's some weird stuff. I've read different places where they've made arguments, like in the 1950s, I saw some stuff about the Soviet Union, and they were claiming that the Soviet Union had was already entering the early stages of communism in the 50s. That's not true, right? I mean, the Soviet Union was still social. It was socialism. They were still struggling to build socialism. The notion that the Soviet Union was entering the early stages of communism in the 50s is wrong. Albania, under Enver Hoxha, in the 80s, they started declaring that they were introducing communism one step at a time. Like they had free bread in stores, bread you didn't pay for, where you could just take it, right? And they were introducing, that wasn't introducing communism. Having free bread that people could take is not introducing communism. Communism is a world without a state. Communism is a world where people can just kind of do what they want, take what they need, right? And that because the socialist revolutions happened in the developing world and in impoverished countries, some of these impoverished countries started declaring that they were fully socialist, or that, and this notion that socialism and material abundance were connected, or that socialism is striving to create a material abundance, got separated. Socialism just kind of became about, we're trying to create a world that's pure in our principles. To get rich is glorious, poverty is anti-communist, poverty is not socialism. That was all very important. So that I recognize. I think that Pol Pot's invasion of Vietnam was absolutely unjustified and incorrect. That I say. I think that in the 80s, a lot of Chinese foreign policy was deeply problematic. I'll say that. And I'm not governing China in the 70s and 80s. I'm not. I don't know if every decision they made was correct. I think the decision to open up a market sector was correct. I really do. I really do think the decision to open up a market sector was overwhelmingly correct. However, I'm not sure that necessarily every way that was carried out was correct. I think that Deng Xiaoping largely saved the Chinese Communist Party. I think that needs to be said. That when Deng Xiaoping arrested the Gang of Four and declared the Cultural Revolution to be over, when he did, right? There's mass celebration in the streets of China when Deng Xiaoping arrested the Gang of Four, because a lot of Chinese scientists, a lot of Chinese teachers, a lot of Chinese intellectuals wanted to make a better country in China, and they couldn't do it because of the Cultural Revolution. They couldn't do it because of the Cultural Revolution. Every 2 days in the Cultural Revolution, they had a down with this or down with that campaign. They would beat people up in public. They would humiliate people by making them walk on broken glass. The Gang of Four were wreckers. Like, the Cultural Revolution started out with Mao and Lin Biao. There was a section of the party that did not, that didn't share Mao's line, basically. So they overthrew. There was kind of an uprising, the January Storm, all of this. to bring down, to kind of overthrow the Communist Party. Like, that's basically, the Cultural Revolution was kind of a mobilization by Mao, and mainly by Lin Biao, because Mao was so old at that point, but Lin Biao, more than anybody, mobilizing the students and the youth to overthrow the Chinese Communist Party. That was the opening shot of the Cultural Revolution, and it was the students, the Red Guards. That was Cultural Revolution Part 1. Cultural Revolution Part 2, after the fall of Lin Biao, was particularly ugly. Cultural Revolution Part 2, all the students were deported from the cities to the countryside because it was understood that, hey, and it's true that people in the cities had a much higher living standard than people in the countryside. So it was like to teach those students about how poor the peasants were. All the students, all the high school age people were deported from the cities. And then on top of that, all the factory workers lived in like a reign of terror where, again, they were having to take turns punishing people in their workplaces for not being pure communists. And it was just, and the rules changed. During the Cultural Revolution, they had rallies on the Korean-Chinese border where they burned Kim Il-sung in effigy, calling him a, quote, fat revisionist pig because he was neutral. He was neither pro-Soviet nor pro-Chinese. During the Cultural Revolution, people who played the violin, that was a Western instrument. So they would go and take the person's violin and burn it, right? During the Cultural Revolution, women who wore makeup would be, forced to get up in front of everyone and apologize for wearing makeup and then have to wear a sign. I am a decadent bourgeois woman who wears makeup. It was just this culture of punishment, right? We are going to, and it went from being, the first stage of the Cultural Revolution was basically there was two lines in the Chinese Communist Party. There was the Mao line and there was the Liu Shaoqi line. It was Mao repudiating Liu Shaoqi. That was the first stage. And it was mainly Lin Biao who was speaking for Mao. And then Mao and Lin Biao had their falling out. The fall of Lin Biao, did he go to, supposedly he was trying to escape to the Soviet Union. It's not clear what happened. But the Gang of Four period is really, really ugly. It's weird. I have met, well, never mind. But anyway, it was a particularly ugly period. And China's economy just couldn't advance. So then, before Mao died, Zhou Enlai died. Zhou Enlai was on the Long March with Mao. He was a Chinese Communist Party official. And he was not a supporter of the Gang of Four. He disagreed with the Gang of Four on a number of key points, but he was close enough to Mao. He was, very, very close to Mao. He'd been on the Cultural Revolution. He was kind of untouchable. They couldn't go after him. When Zhou Enlai died, a whole bunch of students and intellectuals and teachers and scientists went to his funeral, and they mourned for Zhou Enlai, and then they went out and they had an anti-communist riot. And it was rioting. It was called the Tiananmen Incident of 1976. It was a riot, right? Mao died a few months later, and that riot really signified that within Chinese society, there was a very big section that was unhappy. They were very unhappy with what the Gang of Four had done. And so because of that, when Deng Xiaoping came into office, he declared the Cultural Revolution to be over, and he won those people that were anti-communists. And that's what you have to understand. Those people that were rioting after Zhou Enlai's death, most of them, those are the very people, and this is what happened all over Eastern Europe during this time. The same strata, scientists, professors, teachers, educated people, felt like, hey, I have a contribution to make. Right? They felt like I can get something done, I can make a better country, but I'm being stifled. Right? And it was those people that became the Prague Spring people. It was those people that became the protesters in East Germany and elsewhere. Those are the people that ended up, in the name of democratic socialism or freedom or whatever, paving the way for socialism to be overturned in all those countries. And when Deng Xiaoping came in 1978, the reform and opening up, he neutralized all those people. All those people that would have been anti-communists suddenly became back in with the party. They liked the Communist Party again. And if you look at it, and China did have the incidents, 1989, they had their Tiananmen, that whole thing. But you'll notice Czechoslovakia was toppled, East Germany was toppled, Poland was toppled. All the socialist governments in 1989, 1990, 1991, 1992, all the socialist governments of the world were being overthrown. All of them, right? Except for like Cuba, North Korea, China, Vietnam. Well, China, they had their Prague Spring, their students, and the Tiananmen thing, and they stayed in power. That wouldn't have happened if Deng Xiaoping had not been there. Deng Xiaoping, he adjusted China in a way that he kept people loyal to the Communist Party. People that were moving in an anti-communist direction, sections of society that were widely alienated, suddenly became party supporters. And because the party's relationship, instead of the party holding them back and stifling them and calling them, I believe there was the term of stinking number 9. That's what they referred to intellectuals as, right? If you were a professor or a teacher, you were the stinking number 9, I believe. It was like a characterization, right? A classification. You were number 9, the stinking number 9. Well, in the aftermath of the Cultural Revolution, Deng Xiaoping and all that was able to get all these people who felt like the party was suppressing them, like the party hated them, the party was, it flipped it. So now these people were starting computer companies. Now these people were directing scientific research. Now these people were, all of a sudden, they were enabled by the reform and opening up. These people that had been kind of trapped in the state economy and subject to just daily, totalitarian stuff, all of a sudden it switched. It flipped. And they were able to suddenly feel the opposite way. They were suddenly able to make a contribution, get things done, make some more money, and people that would have been anti-communist were sympathizers. One story I hear, right, and this is, people make it sound like, the thing is, all right, there's an old saying, right? You think about wood, all right? Some wood can bend, but wood that cannot bend breaks, right? And it's true, right? If you can bend a little bit, you're less likely to break. But if you can't bend, you snap, you break, right? The Soviet political system couldn't bend. It had big problems in the 80s. And it tried to bend with perestroika, and it broke, right? They tried to adjust the Soviet system, and it broke in two. Right? It didn't have any bend. Chinese socialism had the ability to bend so it didn't break. That's what you need to remember. Right? And you can't, in the 80s, in the 1960s, 70s, and especially in the 80s, it was very, very clear that as much as socialism in Eastern Europe and the USSR had achieved amazing things, which it had some very, very big problems. For example, one story that I often hear about is doctors. There's doctors in Cuba, doctors in Eastern Europe, who would burn their money. Right? Being a doctor, that was one of the most high-paid professions in the Eastern Bloc. And so you had the highest pay scale. But with the highest pay scale, you couldn't do anything. That didn't mean anything, right? So you have somebody who's a doctor, right? He's making maybe, 6, 7 times what other people are making. But he can't, what's he going to do? He can only buy one house. He can only buy one car, right? There's a limit on what he can buy. He can't start a business. He can't invest his money. And so there were a lot of these, professionals, skilled, high-achieving people in the Eastern Bloc who would burn money. They would take money and light it on fire because it was useless. And on top of that, you also had a huge black market, right? Because if you have all these people with all this money they can't do anything with, right? Doctors, scientists, people that are at the top of their profession, high-ranking military people, they're high-achieving people, and they're making lots of money, but they can't do anything with it. Well, they can start buying those underground Beatles albums. They can start buying blue jeans. They can and that, again, opens the door to a black market. The other thing is, you hear stories like this, very common, right? A restaurant under the old Soviet system or the Eastern European system, a restaurant would give awful, awful service. you'd walk in and they didn't want you to be there. Why? Because the less people who came to the restaurant, the more food they got to take home at the end of the night. Right? And especially if it was like a restaurant for tourists, the food they had there was better than what most people got. So at these restaurants that were run by the state, right? The worse service they gave you, the less people who came, the more food they got to keep for themselves. That's not an efficient way of running things, right? That there were big problems in the Eastern Bloc, right? People had health care, people had guaranteed jobs, people were secure, but there were things that needed to be adjusted, right? And they tried to adjust it in country after country, right? In Poland, in Romania, all these countries, they started having liberal reforms, they called it. And these liberal reforms led to the whole thing coming down like a house of cards. China was able to have, I guess you could call it liberal reforms, in a way that actually made the Communist Party stronger. And people who don't think that's important, look what happened in Eastern Europe. Right? After the fall of the Soviet Union, after the fall of the Eastern Bloc, it was a mess. Sex trafficking, heroin, mass poverty, people dying in huge numbers. I mean, it was a disaster. The fall of socialism was an epic humanitarian disaster. Naomi Klein quotes two major people referring to it as economic genocide. The fall of socialism in the Eastern Bloc was a disaster. It was just a titanic, monumental disaster, right? That didn't happen in China. China had liberalization. China's market reforms were messy, absolutely, and bad things happened. But compared to what happened in Eastern Europe, where they overthrew socialism, they restored capitalism, China actually has come out of it much stronger. Now, I mean, Russia has been able to restore itself with the rise of Putin and his reorientation of the economy with the new model with the national champions. But ultimately, the fall of socialism, the counter-revolution of the late 80s, early 90s in Eastern Europe was an epic, epic disaster. And the Chinese Communist Party prevented itself. It was moving in that direction. The fall of Lin Biao, the death of Zhou Enlai, the riots, it was moving that way. And they were supposed to have their counter-revolution in 1989 with the Tiananmen events, and they didn't. They managed to pull it through. And I don't think the Chinese Communist Party would be in power today if they ultimately didn't, have reform and opening up. And that this is one of the problems of socialism, okay? That the Soviet economic model is very good, but it's very good for industrial workers. It's very good for heavy industry, but consumer goods, right? The service sector. The government should not run restaurants. The government should not run hotels. The government should not be designing children's toys. There are some things that need to be subject to some level of market. Industry, electricity, communication, transportation, healthcare, banking, most especially. Those things obviously should be run and subject to a central plan. But, should some government bureaucrat be deciding what toys get manufactured? No. I think the market ought to handle that, right? I think it's better if it's a cooperative, right? Should the government be running restaurants? No. Restaurant where all the workers got a share of whatever, the profits were. So, of course, they would have a big motivation to give you the best service ever, to have the best food ever, because the more hard work they do, the more of a share they get. Worker ownership is great. Cooperatives are great. But should the state run restaurants? No. I don't think we should have government-run restaurants. I don't think we should have government-run hotels. Though, to be fair, I've stayed in government-run hotels in Iran, places like that. They're fine. I mean, they're okay. But, hotels, restaurants, consumer goods, clothing lines. Should the government be designing clothes? No. Consumer goods, the glossy, shiny stuff in life, that should be subject to market vote. I think, right? It should be determined with people buying the best product. But the financialization of those things should be from the state, right? The state should ultimately be and that's really government control over banking is probably the most essential thing, right? People look at Venezuela and they say, okay, well, Venezuela, you've got this huge private sector, right? It can't be socialist. Well, dig a little bit deeper. All of that big private sector in Venezuela all gets loans from banks. And those loans are not assigned on whether the banker can make profits or not. They're assigned on whether the state-run oil company or the state bureaucracy that distributes and lends the money from the state-run, banking, the banking, when the banking is run by the government, when the government starts lending money on the basis of what's best for the community, you don't have bankers, lending money at interest. When banking is in the hands of the state, at the end of the day, the state really has the power. Banking is more important than anything, right? And that's one thing that's left out. If the banking sector, I mean, people underestimate how important the banking sector really is. And that, I mean, I've told the story many times of the 2015 financial meltdown in China, right? The Chinese stock market crashed. And I wrote an article at the time, and it was published, it was widely circulated, the collapse that never happened. Because everyone said in 2015, I believe it was July of 2015, everyone said, oh my God, the Chinese economy is coming down. The stock market went down by 30 points in 2 weeks. This is unbelievable. And nothing happened. And why did nothing happen? Because the party just stepped in. They said anyone who short sells will be arrested. They froze all selling in state-run enterprises. Right? And like a week after the Chinese stock market had dropped by 30 points, it had bounced back up. And on top of that, in the United States, I believe it's roughly 40% of people are directly tied into the stock market, whether it's their pension or their job or whatever, right? So if the stock market tanks, everyone suffers in the United States. In China, less than 7% of the public is tied into the stock market in any way. The stock market is a gambling casino for rich people in China. It's a gambling casino for rich people. It brings in foreign investment, which they use to run their economy. In the USA, the stock market is the center of the economy. See, that's what you don't get. In the USA, the stock market, the entire economy is centered around the stock market. If the US stock market went down by 30 points, there would be riots in the streets. People would lose their life savings because their bank would have just dropped that much, right? Food would stop being delivered, right? If our stock market went down as dramatically as China's stock market went down, the whole society would come to a grinding halt. It would be chaos. In China, the Shanghai stock, market, 30 points, and the government just stepped in and they said, okay, anyone short sells, if you bet, and that's a short sell is a bet against a stock. If you're betting a stock will go down. Anyone who bets against a stock, you're arrested. Okay? Right? Anyone who does that, oh, by the way, all state-owned enterprises, no selling. All right, no selling. All right, and within a week, back up. Because the Chinese economy is not centered around the stock market. The Chinese economy is centered around the state, right? They got a huge state-run steel industry. They've got a state-run banking sector. And then on top of that, all the private corporations are private, except at any point the party can just show up and say, yeah, you're doing this or else we arrest you. The party has this authority. There's no such thing as market freedom, right? If you run a restaurant in the United States, I saw this. Actually, I saw this in Iran, of all places, right? Iran, where they don't believe in Marxism, but they call it not capitalism, but Islam. But I was in Iran. I'll never forget this. I was in Iran. I was in a hotel, right? We were, going to be interviewed. I was like in southern Iran. We're going to be interviewed. This hotel. I've told this story before. I was in a hotel, and the TV crews are going to interview me and a bunch of other people. And so we're in the hotel, in the lobby, and, they've set up the TV cameras to interview us. Well, the hotel owner comes out. No, not in my hotel. You are not doing an interview in my hotel. This is not happening. The the TV company people pull out their IDs and show, hey, look, we're the government. This is government TV. We can do this here. And the hotel owner says, I don't care who you are. You are not gonna, you're not gonna do this interview in my hotel. Not happen. They said, are you sure? Yes, yeah, not gonna happen. I said, okay. So we sat down. We didn't do our interview. They took the cameras down. Then, about an hour later, a bunch of guys in suits showed up. Yeah, 10 or 15 guys in suits showed up. And they went to talk to the hotel manager in the back room. The hotel manager came out. Face was white. Oh, I am so sorry. You can totally do your interview in my lobby. I don't know what I was thinking. Oh, he was very, very nervous, right? So we did our interview. And then later that day, more guys in suits showed up. And they searched every hotel room for any violations of the building code. Because, yeah, it's his private hotel, but it's Iran. And in Iran, the Ayatollahs and the Revolutionary Guards are in control. There is a private sector. There's private hotels. There's private, hamburger stands. There's private, there's even private, factories. But at the end of the day, the state has the power. It's like that in China, too. Right? It's, in America, what were they going to do to that hotel guy, right? That hotel guy says, you're not filming in my hotel, you're not filming in his hotel. That's that. That's how it works. End of story. He has property rights. That's his hotel. Not in Iran, not in China, not in Venezuela. The state has, even in the private sector, the state is the biggest entity. In Venezuela, the state has the oil, it has all the money, it lends money to all the private businesses. There you go. I mean, it's the state ultimately controls the economy. That's the difference between socialism and capitalism. When the state controls the economy, when the economy functions according to what the state says, that's socialism. When the economy functions according to whatever the market dictates, private profits, chaos, that's capitalism. That's the difference, really. But I digress. I ramble on. I see people talking about all kinds of stuff in the chat. What else is on people's minds? Part of me, I know I'm frozen right now, and so I want to keep going as long as I can, just to stick it to YouTube. You know what I mean? Because I don't know what's going on here. My phone is fully charged up. I'm sitting here. I don't know what's going on. So I feel like keeping this going as long as I possibly can is like my little protest against the Silicon Valley YouTube people that may or may not be responsible for my phone freezing, or not my phone. My phone's doing fine. I'm seeing numbers. I'm seeing comments. Go for it, Caleb, says Vega. Swine class, lol. That was so good, Caleb. Great lecture, says Kinky. Thank you. Lincolnite Yankee gives me a data streets. Learn socialist justice. No, that's a weak definition of socialism. Crab. Caleb, as a tanky, would you say capitalism being a force which atomizes people destroys social cohesion? Yes, it was very good. Thanks, Caleb. Crabs, there should be no restoration of normalcy. I don't know what people are talking about here. What a day, man. Wow. What else is new, folks? A friend of mine, I don't know if he's watching now or not. He may not be. He may come across this later. Ooh, super chat. Would you debate anyone from, and then it went by. I don't know who it is I'm supposed to debate. I don't know who it was that I was supposed to debate, but it went by too fast. I like to debate people. And I think debate is a good thing. We need more civil discourse. We need more debate. The last thing I want is people punching each other and all of that. And I believe in debate. I absolutely believe in debate. I absolutely, totally believe in debate. And so if somebody wants me to debate somebody, I would do it. But I would make sure it's in my interest. I don't want to debate. Sometimes you have to decide, is it worth your time? But I believe in debate. So yeah, I would do that. So they're saying anyone from China uncensored. I don't know. Again, would that be worth my time or not? Debate, Eric Stryker, these people. Because, again, does it advance the ideas? Does it help spread the truth in the world? Did Ben Shapiro accept your challenge? No, he didn't. I've gotten an endless amount of comments from Ben Shapiro fans saying that I'm too much of a punk to debate Ben Shapiro. And I'm thinking, really? Because I'm challenging him to debates. I've been tweeting at him, so, whatever. Hey, what can you do? But a friend of mine, we were talking earlier about the grapes of wrath. A friend of mine I was talking to today pointed out to me, and a lot of people have hinted at this before, and I don't, this is one of those situations where I don't have the answer, and I don't think anyone does. What was the rate of malnutrition-related deaths in the United States in the 1930s? Right? We know that there were malnutrition deaths in the USA. People died from hunger all across America in the 1930s. How many? That's my question. Right? How many Americans died of malnutrition during the 1930s? I've heard people say all kinds of things, right? I've heard people say, well, the U.S. Census indicates they didn't, or I've heard people say, well, there are weird things in the census where people weren't being counted because they weren't in their homes, they'd fled to California. But, you know, all these people that lost their farms, all the Tom Joad families, right? You hear stories in the 1930s about, like, dead bodies along the side of the road because people had starved to death. You hear about the Hoovervilles, where all these people were homeless, and they lived in you know, tents and huts, you know, that were starving to death. In the 1930s, it was very common for people to boil dandelions and eat them because they were so desperately died as a result of those economic conditions. I'm curious. I'd like to know, you know? And no one ever talks about it. Everyone who ever died in a famine in the Soviet Union is personally Stalin's fault, right? That's what we've learned from the anti-communists. Stalin personally killed all of them, right? If anyone died in the USSR due to any economic problem, it was Stalin and communism personally murdering them, and that's how you're supposed to interpret it. But how many people in the United States died during the Great Depression, right? You know, I mean, there are examples of, quote, man-made famines of capitalism. India had a great example. In, you know, the early 20th century, there was a famine in India. And people in India died. And it was forced on them. They weren't being given food. It was like they wrecked their agricultural sector. It was like intentionally done by the British. And it was said by Winston Churchill that the reason the famine had happened is because the people in India, there's too many of them, they breed like rabbits. Right? The British Empire carried out a for real man-made famine in India. Right? The British Empire, go back to Oliver Cromwell, right? I mean, there was massacres and famine imposed on Ireland over and over and over again. You had man-made famines in Ireland, right? There was, you know, British capitalism. I mean, even in its earliest incarnations with Oliver Cromwell up into the Victorian time, you know, the potato famine up into, you know, there were man-made famines in Ireland in which millions of people starved to death because of capitalism, right? Someone's saying Yemen. Yeah, today in Yemen, we have a man-made famine created by Saudi Arabia and the West as they are trying to starve Yemen into submission as they bomb the place. It's an ongoing war, right? So this allegation, right, every famine that happened in the USSR was Stalin personally, you know, deciding that these people must, I mean, you know, we have this narrative where like famine, bad agricultural policy is the equivalent of death camps, right? We've already got that problem, but no one acknowledges these man-made famines from capitalism. And I think it would be worth looking into them, and especially the 1930s. We know that there were malnutrition-related deaths in the 1930s. But has there been a study of them? How many of them were there, right? I mean, the USA is the first world. It's previously industrialized. You know, was there mass malnutrition-related deaths? I mean, there seems to have been at least quite a few malnutrition-related deaths during the 1930s. How many were there is the question. I'm curious how many there were. I don't know. I can't give you an answer. I want someone to look into this. I've heard weird things about the U.S. Census, but then I've heard people say, well, no, those people didn't die. They were just moving to different places because of the you know, I've heard different things. But I'm curious, you know, I mean, it's worth investigating, I think, you know, because the way things are done. But what else is new, folks? What else are people talking about? Someone said I should go on with Tucker Carlson. That would be great. I'd love to go on with Tucker. That'd be great. Will the GOP disintegrate after Trump, says Swine Class? Well, you know what I think? I think that, you know, it's been widely written about how the two political parties changed places. The Republicans were the liberal party when they were formed. They took their name from republicanism, the French Revolution. Marx was with the Republicans. Free land, free labor, free men. They were the revolutionaries, the free soilers. Now they're the conservative party. The Democrats were the conservative party at that point. They were for slavery. They were for segregation. Now the Democrats are the liberal party. I think we're on the verge, gradually. It'll take some time, okay? It's certainly not where it's at now. I have a feeling the political parties, give it 10, 20 years, are going to flip again. That's my feeling. The fact that Trump is already being accused of being a conspiracy theorist, right? The fact that the Republicans are now the party, that is seems to be more friendly to non-interventionism. I mean, you got Tulsi Gabbard as a Democrat, but Rand Paul, Trump saying he wanted to end the wars. The Republicans seem to be positioning themselves more and more as non-interventionists. I suspect that given enough time, the Republicans will be the left party and the Democrats will be the conservative party. As the Democrats move to be the party of the liberal establishment, and the Republicans increasingly are accused of being quote-unquote conspiracy theorists. Right now, the Republicans are more and more becoming the right opposition, the right-wing opposition to the liberal order. However, as some kind of left-wing opposition to the liberal order emerges, I have a feeling, that's just a hunch I have. Give it 10, 20 years, the Republicans will be the left party, and the Democrats will be the conservative party. Because conservative, in a lot of ways, being a conservative is defending the status quo. Right now, Republicans kind of represent a right-wing opposition to the status quo. I have a feeling that people that don't like the status quo from the left will increasingly be in the Republican Party. Look, you're more likely to see Richard Wolff on Fox News than on MSNBC. That's just a fact. Right? Think about it. How many times has Richard Wolff, the Marxist economist, been on MSNBC? Not that many. He's been on there before. How many times has Richard Wolff, the Marxist economist, been on Fox? Think about it. I think that the Republicans, as they're becoming the opposition party, during the Cold War they were not. The Democrats were the opposition party. The Republicans were the mainline party. Now, the Republicans are the opposition party. The Democrats are becoming the de facto ruling party. They're the mainline party. Hardline believers in the establishment are Democrats. Opposition to the establishment from the right is Republican. I think that as some kind of Bernie Sanders-ish opposition emerges, there's a chance that the Republican Party could actually flip, and the Republican Party could start to be the left-wing critique of. It's possible. I mean, maybe I'm losing my mind here, but I almost feel like the political parties could flip again. I think it's very possible. But then again, it's just an idea. I'm just talking out the top of my head here, right? I'm just philosophizing. I'm just thinking. But, it's not going to happen today. I'm certainly not in favor of the Republicans now. And right now, the Republican Party is the opposition from the right. I mean, they want something worse than the status quo. They want to deregulate everything. They want, yeah. In some ways, on foreign policy, they're better than it's complicated. It really is complicated. Right now, I don't think I would ever be comfortable with the Republican Party, but I feel like things can change. Things change very rapidly. The other thing, though, that very well may happen is that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party may both split. Right? People talk about third parties. They want a third party, right? I want a third party. Well, increasingly, what might happen is, the Republican Party wasn't just a third party. It wasn't like the Green Party and people just all... No, it was formed as a split from the Whigs. And I feel like both major parties, there's two Republican parties at this point, and there's two Democratic parties. There's the Bernie Sanders Democratic Party, and there's the DNC, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris Democratic Party. There's the Republican side, you've got the America First, Donald Trump Republican Party, and you've got the Marco Rubio, neocon Republican Party. And I think it's very possible we could get like the America First Party and the Republican Party, and we could get the Democratic Socialist Party and the Democratic Party. That kind of thing could happen also. I feel like, though, the way our political system is set up, where we have first past the post elections, we are really oriented toward two parties. So, we're not oriented toward four parties. And that's one thing. We don't have a parliamentary system. The way our elections are set up, it would be very difficult to have more than two parties. And that's the weird thing. People talk about one-party states. The more you look at the United States, the USA is a two-party state in roughly the same way as a lot of countries are one-party states, right? Poll watching. A lot of states have a rule. When it's time to count the votes, you can have a Republican there and a Democrat there. Well, what if there's a third party? Libertarian or a Green or a Socialist? Because they're the two parties, right? If you're a third party, you need to get a bunch of petitions. You got to mortgage your house and get a loan and pay all this and do all this and have a you have to jump through 20 hoops to get on the ballot. If you're a Democrat and you're on the ballot, you're on the ballot. You're a Republican, you're on the ballot, you're on the ballot. Right? I mean, there are ways that the two parties function almost in the manner of, it's like, yeah, other parties are allowed, but they're not real. The other thing that is often criticized and pointed to about third parties is that and this really came up during the whole Bernie DNC thing, is that third parties can be completely undemocratic. Or not third parties, the DNC, that's what they said with the Bernie Sanders lawsuit. They said, look, we're a private organization. The Democratic Party is a private organization. There's no reason that we had to do it in a fair way, right? We could rig it for Bernie, or we could rig it against Bernie, because we're a private group. The DNC, right? This isn't election fraud. It's the Democratic primary. The Democratic Party is a private club. It's a private organization, right? If your Elks Club wants to have an election and it's rigged, you're allowed, right? In theory. Right? And that was the argument. And I believe they won in court, arguing that, look, maybe we did ring it against Bernie, but we're allowed. We're a private party. Right? I know that, there's weird examples of this. I know that, when, of all people, here I am, when David Duke, do folks remember David Duke, the white supremacist, when he ran as a Republican in the Republican primary for president, a lot of Republicans states wouldn't let him on the ballot because he was an embarrassment. It's not something the Republicans want to be associated with. They don't want to be associated with David Duke and his message. But David Duke was like, hey, I'm a Republican. I was a member of Congress. Why am I not on the ballot in the primary? But a lot of states, the state Republican Party said, you're not going to be on the ballot in our state. End of discussion. And it's like, hey, they're a private party. They can choose who's on the ballot. So think about it, right? I'm not sitting here advocating for the rights of David Duke. I'm just explaining that, that there's a weird way of doing things where, the two... I'll never forget, man. Why do I have all these bitter stories about college? I don't know. I remember during the 2008 election, I was in college, and I was in a 300-level political science course for people that are well into their political science major. And this girl who was in this same course with me, this is not Politics 101. This is Politics 300 level. Asks me, Caleb, who are you voting for? 2008. I said, I'm supporting Cynthia McKinney of the Green Party. And she turned to me and she said, do you realize she has no chance of winning? And I thought, geez, I never thought of that. There's these two big parties called the Democrats and the Republicans. The Green Party, they're not allowed in the debates. I'm a political science major at a private university. And I never did it occur to me that Cynthia McKinney wouldn't win. Wow, thank you for telling me this. You've changed my mind. Now I'm going to vote for Obama. I mean, it was like she turned to me. Do you realize she has no chance of winning? Of course I realized that. It's like, and it's like it's never occurred to these people. I mean, I don't know. People can be very, very ridiculous. I voted for Cynthia McKinney in 2008. I did. I told Cynthia McKinney that one time at dinner. We talked. I was a while back. She was in town. And I told Cynthia McKinney I voted for her. I think Cynthia McKinney's great in a lot of ways. I mean, I don't endorse all of her positions, but she has some views that I don't necessarily agree with. But I think she's great. I really do. And I mean, when she was in Congress, she did a lot of amazing stuff. Wow, I'm just kind of keep principle. That's what learned socialist justice says. That's an interesting thing there. Um, Jill Stein or bust says scuffed world order, right? Caleb, do you think the libertine ID poll element on the left holding back the labor movement? Should there be a new left? Well, I'm not going to read it to you now, but I do have a section in my book called The Synthetic Left. And you should read it. I think you'll really enjoy it. Promoting lesser evilism is admitting democracy doesn't work. Well, here's a weird thing, though. My whole life, I kind of would have agreed that I always thought of I didn't, my whole political life, I saw the Democrats as a lesser evil. I was like, okay, well, the Democrats are slightly better than the Republicans. If people vote for the Democrats, it shows people are less right-wing. 2016 was the first election where my jaw kind of dropped. And as I watched both campaign speeches, I watched Hillary Clinton, I watched all their rallies, Hillary Clinton and Trump's rallies on TV. It was the first time where I actually felt like I don't know. I'd always felt like, the Democrats were slightly better. Right? I was disappointed in the Democrats, was frustrated with them, but I always felt like they were better. 2016, I was like, I don't know. Right? Hillary Clinton, she was awful in a lot of ways, not just on a personal level, but she was more militaristic, more pro-war. She was calling Trump a conspiracy theorist. She was, it was bad, right? Trump was saying he wanted to end the wars, but then Trump was saying stuff about Muslims I really didn't like. He was saying things about the police state and police brutality that I really didn't like. So it was like with Trump, when he would talk about foreign policy, a lot of times I agreed with him. When he would talk about that have abandoned the American people and the rich that have all the power, I was with him. But then when Trump started talking about domestic stuff and he started saying things like, I know a cop in Chicago who could end this murder crisis in 1 week and, torture works. And it was like there was some stuff about Trump that was so scary and awful, I couldn't support Trump. But when Hillary Clinton would talk about foreign policy, it sickened me. When she would talk about, America is great because America is good. I mean, it was just like I would hear Hillary Clinton speak and I would want to throw up. But then some of the stuff she said about, hey, we need to tolerate people's religions. Hey, we need to, that was better than what Trump was saying about Muslims and about, immigrants. And so it was like the first election where it was kind of like, and I thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. Everyone did, right? All the polls seemed to show that, But it was the first election where I wasn't sure who was better. When Trump won, I wasn't like, all these people were crying and stuff. I wasn't crying. I was kind of like, okay. Wow, didn't see that coming. That was kind of my response to Trump winning. It was like, okay. This is kind of good and kind of bad. This is bad in some ways. I can understand why a lot of people are afraid and upset. But in some ways, this actually isn't so bad. I don't know. It was the first election where I was like, and if Hillary Clinton had won, I probably would have said the same way. I would have been like, this is bad in some ways. But in some ways, this is okay. It was the first election where it was like, there was no lesser of two evils. It was different evil, but it wasn't lesser of two evils. During the Obama years, Black Agenda Report started referring to the Democrats as the more effective evil. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. The more effective evil, right? That the Democrats carry out their evil in a way that is much more effective, right? Whereas the Republicans, it's much more in your face, it's much more blatant, and it's much sloppier, right? But, I mean, that's one way of looking at it. But who knows what's going to happen in the next little bit. I'm having a great time just gabbing with you all. Fun time here. But listen, I think I've kept this going for long enough. I am really happy that you all stuck with me throughout all of this. I have been frozen for a long time, for at least a half hour I've been frozen here. I don't know what's going on. I am going to shut this down. I'm going to shut it down. But hey, you all get huge points for being loyal. So if you haven't ordered a copy of my book, be sure to do it. You're going to love it. You really will. It's a new exciting thing. And, you know, I'm working on the mysterious book #2 that I don't want to say much about. It's going to be a little bit longer before it comes out because I'm putting a lot of work into it. We're having a great time here. We're doing great things. We're part of a community. I'm glad you all stuck it out, even though I froze. Get your copy of City Builders and Vandals in Our Age. And, you know, we're doing a great thing here. I mean, we're struggling for truth in a world of lies. You know, a friend of mine, she said to me, young woman, 19 years old, student in New York City, said to me, you know, you don't sound like other socialists, Caleb. You don't sound like other socialists and communists, Caleb. She's right. We're doing something really unique here. This is a unique brand. This is a very, very unique brand we have here. Socialism with American characteristics, you know, anti-liberalism. I don't know what you want to call it. This is a unique brand. This is not something you get other places. And you and me, we're all a community here. And that's what I love about this. The Inundation and Swine Class and Kinky and JT24. And you guys are here every time, right? This is like, you know, this is like a little community that we've got here. Nathaniel Adams, you know, you all are here. We know each other, right? This is like hanging out at the bar with your friend or something, right? We're getting along. Where's Jenny Lynn? Good question. I'm sure she'll watch this later. She's awesome, right? You know, Sharon Pitts, she's great. You know, I mean, there's a lot of us here. Lisa, Lincolnite Yankee. I mean, we're all kind of a community here. I like it. I really like it. You know, we're having a great time here. So let's keep this up. You know, I mean, thanks for sticking it out amid this freezing and all of that. And you know, we got a lot of things we're working on here. But, you know, hey, remember that slogan that I've been using. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We're doing great things here, folks. I'm glad we're all here doing our thing. Happy Saturday. My best wishes to all of you. Stay strong. I'm out.